Hello, everybody. Dr. Carmen Bryant, Redefining Yourself, a program that was developed for women who are contemplating leaving, needing more information, or recovering from domestic violence, specifically narcissist abuse. Hopefully, you've been following me on YouTube. If you have not, please subscribe to my channel. It's Dr. Carmen Bryant, Overcoming Narcissist Abuse, and on my professional Facebook page, which is Psychological Health Consultants and Services. And you are welcome to follow. If you've been watching, I've been building a foundation, the foundational layers, and giving you information of what narcissist abuse looks like, what it is, and, some theories. And I like looking up information. I love to research information, especially because of the fact that I know what's in my head as a clinician. A lot of times I need to know how to articulate that in common language where everyone understands it. I remember when I was in the military, I had a leader say, "You're only as smart as your crowd." So if you use giant words and no one understands, you're the only smart one there. No one understands you. You're just as dumb as they are. Now, I know that was a harsh way of speaking. That's military culture. But I mean, it is a fact. You can't speak over people's head and expect for them, or you want to look really, really smart, so you speak over people's head. Well, no one understands what you're saying. It's like speaking another language. And so, even though I'm a clinician and I work in the field, I do like to go and listen to life coaches, especially if you haven't already. Please go see Miss Angie Atkinson's YouTube channel. She's really, really good, and I listen to her a lot in order to articulate what I'm thinking, and I learned the verbiage, or the wording, dealing with the world of narcissism, and narcissistic abuse, and so a lot of times I do have theories, based on I have 22 years of experience in a narcissist relationship, 22 plus or 20 plus. And then as a clinician, years of experience with, survivors of relationships that were with a narcissist, and even with clients that come in with narcissistic personality disorder. And one theory that I've always had, and one common traits, or some common traits that I've noticed in every single one of the individuals that have NPD, or narcissistic personality disorder. And when I say narcissist, I don't mean just throwing the word out to be, to fight back. I mean the actual diagnosis, narcissistic personality disorder, and they meet the criteria. All of them had common life experience, and that was childhood sexual abuse, and or neglect, parental neglect, or overindulgence, but all of them had childhood sexual trauma. And so, even researchers, I kind of looked up to see what researchers were saying, or, people were saying in reference to the link between childhood trauma and development of personality disorders. Remember, a personality disorder is a pathological, meaning or abnormal personality. You have people that have a bubbly personality, and they have, you're like, oh my gosh, you can see it's such a beautiful personality. Well, think about a personality disorder. Means that there's a dysfunction. Somehow or another, there has been a something that has happened during the development of the child that caused, it's called arrested development. Somewhere in that development, it was arrested, probably because of trauma. These are my theories, and I was researching. Some people do agree with that, and there's research done about that. But something happened during the development of the child, where the personality was became abnormal. It developed abnormally. And I say that, if you think about it for just a minute, let me go find this that I was reading in reference to child abuse. So let's look at child sexual abuse, or child abuse. So it says that, let me look where this states. This is on American Society for Positive Child Care, and it says that almost 60,000 children are sexually abused. More than 90% of juvenile sexual abuse victims know their perpetrator, and it's estimated that between 50 to 60% of maltreatment fatalities are not recorded on death certificates. Can you imagine that? Now, the other thing I was looking at is, let me find it for you guys. So, This is an applied research that was conducted. Let me make sure I keep my page. Let me find my page. Okay. This is the National Online Resource Center on Violence Against Women, is vawnet.org. And this is the psychological consequences of sexual trauma by Nicole P. Hopefully I pronounced this right. Young, Mary P. Koss, and Mitro Stone. And so I was looking at some of the information in this research that talked about, first of all, we know that those people that have suffered from childhood abuse, childhood sexual abuse, are more likely to suffer from depression and other mental health problems. And it says here that in one study, the rate of lifetime depression among childhood rape survivors was 52% compared to 27% among non-victims. And so, let's see. It also says a separate investigation showed that childhood sexual abuse was associated with an increased risk of serious suicide even after accounting for the effects of previous psychological problems and a twins' history of suicidal ideation. So it was a study done with twins. And that, let's see, I'm going to move down a little bit before I start my conversation. And there was something on this page that I really wanted to talk about. So childhood sexual trauma may affect how people have relationships or, develop relationships with people. Because remember, the way, if you had a perpetrator that sexually molested you or abused you as a child, your thoughts on how it affects your thoughts on how relationships are supposed to be is warped, because a child doesn't know any better. You're building a child and teaching a child, and so if they have been violated at a very young age, they have a distorted perception on how relationships are supposed to go. And let me see some of them. So it says clinical observations have revealed that some adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse report problems with low sexual interest and few close relationships. So think about it for just a minute. If you have been, and I commend you all for, because you're survivors. You are overcomers, and I can't imagine the pain and suffering that you went through, and even the post-traumatic stress disorder that you are probably suffering from. It also says, though, that there are some that are totally turned off by sexual encounters. They have no desire for sex. Some women have reported that they have no desire in male relationships when it's a male perpetrator. Some females have reported that they have no interest in any male relationships. They do not have a desire, and even not all in the LGBTQ, not all homosexual or lesbian individuals have been sexually molested. That's a myth. That's not true. Not all of them have. A lot of them that have reported that they had been sexually abused as children. And there are women that have told me that they have no desire to ever be with a man because they relive the trauma over and over again. And likewise for some men, they have no desire to be with women because they have been abused by women, or the shame that's associated with that. And I was reading that in one of these studies. It says that oftentimes when a child has been groomed and sexually exploited or abused or molested in childhood, a lot of times they're confused because it also comes along with affection. Not all sexual predators are violent perpetrators. It is a violent crime, but the way that they do it is not often brutal or to inflict pain. Remember, a lot of them are just focused on themselves, which is self-gratification, and so the child becomes confused because of the fact that the shame that they live with, they carry with the shame even after being told it's not their fault. And this is on Psychology Today, that first of all, the burden of the secret, and then the fact that it actually felt good. If you think about it, though, when you have a child, if you introduce a child to candy, they want candy because it tastes good. And so, our bodies, and this is what I explain when we're in a clinical setting, our bodies are supposed to respond to sexual touch. Sexual touch, pleasures, and it's a good feeling for those of you that had that experience, and so you do desire to repeat that. When you have a child is not mature enough in their head to know that that is wrong. They don't feel right, something is not right, but I like that feeling. And so sometimes, if that's the only connection, or I get attention from my perpetrator, which is parents, or relatives, or whomever whoever has violated that child, they look for that gratification. That's a good feeling. And so they'll do things in order to get stimulated, and it's not the child's fault. The child doesn't know any better. And many people that have come into counseling, and this is men and women alike, especially men, where they're so ashamed that they had been, especially sexually molested by a man, that, and the shame was, and they give me the opportunity to speak because a lot of men are not going to say it, but the fact that it actually felt pleasurable and they liked it. But to have to articulate that or to say that was the greatest shame, and a lot of them were so humiliated when they said that. And the question was, does that mean that I'm gay? Absolutely not. That does not mean that you're gay. That means that your body responded properly to sexual touch, and it wasn't the victim's fault. It was the perpetrator's fault, because the perpetrator knew what they were doing and they were old enough to know what they were doing. But it was a self-gratification, selfish thing that was done. And so a lot of men feel relieved that, I thought that meant that I was gay because I actually enjoyed the experience. But when I became older, I realized that it was wrong, and so they become very angry and combative. Some men that have been neglected, abused, or even sexually molested by a woman, oftentimes you find them, they have a lot of conflicts in relationships with women. They do become very abusive, very angry at women because they weren't protected or they were violated by women at a very young age. And so usually I have to, I'm one that likes to do very good assessments, to ask a lot of questions and ask hard questions that most of the time people, are afraid to or have never actually had to think about and answer. And sexual abuse, childhood sexual abuse, is one of them. Even I've had clients come through that were victims of child trafficking. They were sold into child trafficking when a child doesn't know the same things that an adult does. So they know something is wrong and that they're afraid, but they don't understand even the results of that type of trauma. And so here I deal with a lot of different experiences associated with childhood sexual trauma. But I've always theorized, until I actually went to go look it up, I always theorized, I said that even though they're still studying narcissistic personality disorder, they're still studying that, and, they really haven't come up with a hard conclusion as to exactly what causes it. They have different theories, and on here it actually says social conditioning, a lot of it dealing with how the parent raised the child or what the child was exposed to, narcissistic parents, childhood sexual abuse, but one of the things, or neglect or overindulgent, social conditioning. Nowadays in society, everything is about appearances, looks, and health and fitnesses. And you have these young girls that are full figured, like I am, and as society tells you, or they body shame and they tell you that that is unacceptable and you're not pretty unless you look like this. The part that they don't tell you is that those that look like this, a lot of them suffer from mental health or eating disorders or drug addictions in order to maintain this facade of beauty. Beauty fades within time. And some people are blessed enough to maintain the beauty that they've had in youth, or some, pin it, sew it, pull it, stitch it, whatever they do. But society has got this impression that, they give us the definition of what beauty is, and beauty is different across, all countries, all continents. What one person deems as beautiful is, in one country, they believe that, to have a full-figured woman shows the success of a man. So, my man will be rich. But, a full-figured woman is it is a display of the man's wealth that he's able to take care of his family that way. For some, thin is in, and for some, nowadays you look at different countries, Brazil and African Americans and Africa, and people are very shapely, within the world of modeling and fashion, some of the, a size 10 is too big, is full size, compared to a size 20 model, that's full size. So people have given their perception of what beauty is. And so, here you have people trying to, and you wonder where narcissistic thinking is, in a beauty industry, and what society is telling our girls, what they're supposed to look like. Let me look. So, on one site that I went to is called Childhood Trauma Recovery, and what they were saying was, right now they don't have. They're still doing research for the link between the childhood trauma and the development of personality disorders, but it says that the statistical fact that the experience of childhood trauma and personality disorder are very frequently indeed seen to go together, or comorbid, meaning to exist at the same time in the patient. Suffering from a personality disorder has profoundly damaging impact on a person's life if left untreated. People who suffer from personality disorders tend to have a very rigid, inflexible, and damaging for themselves and for others ways of managing vital areas of their lives, work, relationships, or even leisure time, because of the whole host of problems. Let me scroll down, or let me go to another site. There was something else I wanted to add together while I was doing this. So back to the vawnet.org, the research, it says that, distress experienced by adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse may also be related to their use of particular coping strategies. Survivors may use different coping behaviors to protect themselves from negative feelings, thoughts, and internal conflict, but in some cases, the mechanisms may contribute to additional distress. For example, some survivors experience changes in conscious and memory, producing a trance-like state or perceptions that one is living in a dream or a movie. And so when I do the post-traumatic stress disorder assessments on the CAPS-5, it's an assessment tool that I use to solidify a PTSD diagnosis and symptomology. One of the things on there is depersonalization and derealization, which basically is saying, and I'll put both of them together, is a coping mechanism used by people that have experienced extreme trauma is to dissociate, for their mind to dissociate, to go somewhere that's safe in order for them to be able to handle the trauma, their mind to be able to handle the trauma that they've been in, or constantly feeling like they're in a dream state, or dissociated, or separated from their body, that they're watching the events taking place, but it feels like they're having an outer body experience watching the events take place. But this is also a mechanism used, a defense mechanism used by the brain to protect itself. Just like the body goes into shock, the brain goes into shock as well, and it uses a different mechanism to try to protect itself, which is dissociation and depersonalization. So on PTSD, when we give the diagnosis, with or without dissociative symptoms, that depends on how severe the trauma was. One of the other things that they noted was extreme experiences of victimization may also be associated with symptoms of personality disorder known as borderline personality disorder. And remember, there are some narcissists that have the traits of borderline personality, histrionic, a lot of times for females, psychopath or sociopathic, which is now called anti-personality disorder. And the borderline personality disorder is characterized by enduring patterns of instability in relationship, goals, values, mood, and non-fatal suicide and suicide behavior and suicide threats. Also, they have impulsive behaviors that may be harmful, like substance abuse, unsafe sex, and the research also showed that among severely impacted survivors of childhood sexual trauma, such as women, in high security psychiatric hospitals, borderline personality is a common diagnosis. So let's see. There's a lot of stigma that surrounds that as well. Also, childhood sexual trauma is also associated with other personality disorders, including those that are distinguished by enduring patterns of distrust and suspiciousness, such as paranoid personality disorder, grandiosity and the need for admiration, which is narcissistic personality disorder, social inhibition and feelings of inadequacy, avoidant personality disorder, or submissive and clinging behavior, dependent personality disorder. So you can see the effects of sexual trauma, sexual abuse, especially in childhood. Back to the childhood trauma recovery, it says that narcissistic personality disorder is thought to be due to arrested development. Arrest in the development during the developmental stages of childhood, where the child is having to accomplish certain milestones in life during the time that they are developing. If somewhere a trauma has occurred, they have the inability to overcome those obstacles to move on to the next level of development. So think about it, the foundation has been damaged, and now that's like building on a broken foundation, and you're building and it goes side where the building doesn't go straight up because the structure is damaged, so it grows sideways. So the way that they view the world, the way that they view relationships, they idealize, in their mind they develop good relationships in their head, and a lot of times what ends up happening is those that have suffered from childhood sexual trauma, they attach and they in their mind they develop what they want in relationship, or idolize a perfect relationship, only to find out that for some they have connected to a narcissist female or narcissistic male, or vice versa, a narcissistic male or a narcissistic female, or just dysfunctional relationships in general. The person doesn't live up to what they saw in their head. One of the things in here, it says that, let's look, for those that come, for those like with narcissistic personality disorder, a lot of times when they go into the therapeutic setting with a therapist, and remember we were talking about this before, is like the autoimmune deficiency or autoimmune problems. Narcissistic personality disorder is like a personality disorder gone wrong, and like it's attacking itself, and so they're looking for attention and validation. And so a lot of times when they come into therapy, because of the fact that the therapist is usually empathetic, and we operate with our listening skills, and we're concerned, it's a part of our training. And for a lot of us, that's a part of who we are, our character as well, to help you, but also that we have ethics, and we have boundaries dealing with mental health clients, especially if you're a trauma professional. As a trauma professional, we always have to make sure that our guards are up, because people use maladaptive ways of manipulation to get their needs met, specifically a narcissist. A narcissist, remember, they have this insatiable appetite for admiration, and that grandiosity, for that admiration. And so they come into therapy knowing that a therapist will validate, but therapists, you have to remember not to over validate. And if you notice that they're constantly wanting you to validate, or they play that victim role, or woe is me, and then you find yourself always trying to validate, always trying to make them feel, that's what they're looking for. That might be a red flag that you may be dealing with a narcissist. Not all the time, but that's a check. Check that. Pay attention to that. Also, if a lot of times, if a therapist is really skilled, when you're looking for certain things, like I said, I don't deal with personality disorders. Normally, if I find that they have severe personality disorders, I deal with them the best I can, dealing with the diagnosis and med, referring them to med providers. But when I notice that it's really severe, because I have had clients put their hands on me, not to a point where I was going to fight them back, but once you start crossing boundaries, or therapists, when they start crossing boundaries because they're testing your boundaries, it's time to recognize and let them go. Don't concern yourself with money. If you're all about the money, you're going to get hurt, you're going to get damaged, you're not going to be able to help them the best way. Sometimes the best way to help them is to get them out of your office as well. And so when it gets to a point where it becomes it becomes dangerous, or if they have crossed boundaries and they're testing your boundaries to see how far you go, it's time to go ahead and refer them out to somewhere else that specializes in personality disorders. And so, a good therapist is able to uncover other psychological problems and defense mechanisms that are used, that client uses to protect itself. So remember, you're dealing with a narcissist. You're dealing with an individual whose defense mechanism has gone wrong, and it's fighting itself. They're fighting itself. One of the things, and this may include idealization. So this often is a primary defense, whereas the individual idolizes his or her relationships, at first elevating both self and other in terms of status and specialness, to illusionary high levels. Devaluation, and remember, this is on childhoodtraumarecovery.com. I really like this, and I wanted to share that. Devaluation, it refers to an individual that discounts and regarding as worthless anyone who undermines his or her grandiose vision of themselves. So if you don't, see how awesome they are and give them credit on how awesome they are and how smart they are, then they will devalue you. Detachment, this is linked to devaluation, and it refers to an individual's propensity to sever links with anyone who threatens to undermine their exalted view of themselves. Acting out, this refers to performing extreme behaviors to express thoughts, feelings, and emotions that the person feels incapable of otherwise expressing. So they may not be able to verbalize, what they're feeling or what they're thinking, so they act it out. Like children, a lot of times they don't know how to verbalize or articulate how they're feeling, and so they act out. So their behaviors is an indicator sometimes of their environment as well. But you look at the behavior they're trying to communicate. You have to remember that when you're dealing with a narcissist, though that narcissist may be chronologically 30, 40, 50 years old, they remember emotionally they have an arrested development. So a lot of times they may sound very intelligent, they sound very, very educated, but if you get them to a point where they slip, and most of them do, when they begin to respond emotionally and the things that they say when they act out, a lot of times you can trace it back to a specific age. That person acts like they're about 16, 9, 3 years old, because emotionally they have not developed. So they're emotionally dead. So even the way that they cope with stress or the way that they communicate, a lot of times if you get them under that type of stress, they'll act out, and you can see their true character. Splitting is another term that refers to cutting off from consciousness the part of themselves that holds the emotional pain to prevent it from becoming integrated into consciousness. As for this to occur would be psychologically overwhelming. So remember the dissociation, they develop this persona about themselves. They develop this image of themselves so that they don't have to deal with the reality of the trauma that they have experienced, or the emotional pain that they experience. That's the problem, is that if you live like that for so long, that becomes a permanent part of your personality. Is hard to come back out of that. That is a safe zone for them. Even if it's destructive to themselves or destructive to other people, that is a safe zone for them. And so they split. Every now and then you will see their personality come out, but they're afraid of that vulnerability, because they're afraid of being hurt again anyway, but they're afraid of that vulnerability. And so you may get a piece of it, they see how you react, but then they'll go back into this facade. They'll split back into this facade to protect their minds from that emotional pain. Projective identification. This is when the person unconsciously projects onto another, imagines the other to possess parts of their own ego, and then expects the other to become identified with whatever has been projected. So remember, they project their thoughts and their opinions, and they remember the glasses that I talked about, the mirror glasses. Imagine the mirror being on the inside of the glasses, and they see you how they see themselves, and they don't like themselves, so they project that dislike onto you, because they only see you the way that they see themselves. They don't see you as an individual person. Denial, it is simple form that just means not accepting certain unpleasant parts of reality that protects the ego. Even to have to tell a narcissist, that your behavior is like this, or that you're abusive, or they will deny it. Most narcissists are not going to admit the fact that they're abusive. They give you a little bit, but they'll never take a responsibility or accountability of the abuse. And there's so many women and men that are waiting for that narcissist just to have this epiphany and say, oh, I was so terrible, please forgive me. I realized that I did this and I abused this. you have to make up in your mind that you're probably never going to get that. And even if you get it, it might be superficial. It has no, you don't feel that satisfaction or that closure. They won't give you closure. They're just not going to do that. They're narcissists. And so even, to for a woman to report that they have been physically abused or have been through domestic violence or psychologically abused, or, they're not going to admit it. They'll lie and they'll make you seem like the perpetrator, but they're not going to take accountability for what they do. It's your fault. So we've gotten beyond that. Let's see if there's anything else in here that I wanted to share with you. Okay, let's look. Let's look, make sure that I've given you all this information that I was looking at. We did the statistics, we did some of the childhood. One of the things that it was saying on Psychology Today was, the biggest thing within narcissism is that lack of empathy and the grandiosity, the lack of empathy. They do not see or realize the impact their behavior has on others. So that they have the incapacity of being able to, they have the inability to step into other people's shoes, but they only see their own needs. So their sense of entitlement is paramount, so let's see. So we got that. Remember that, the biggest thing is the empathy thing. Another thing that I was reading, and I can't find it, that's what I was looking for to share, is that, when a child is in a home with narcissistic parents or narcissistic caregivers, if their needs are not met, babies cry to get a response. That's their way of communicating. And so they get their needs met. Kids are like the biggest manipulators. They know how to, fake the cry and get the attention. And so that's what kids do. That's how they learn how to communicate before they can articulate themselves. But when a child's needs are not met, after a while, they realize that the crying or the expression of the emotion is not, their needs are not being met. And so growing up, eventually they realize my emotions, my feelings, and my thoughts are irrelevant. No one responds to it, no one caters to it, and so they shut it off. And so, even in when I have dealt with narcissists, or when I deal with the survivors of narcissists, I usually tell them is that their empathy is cut off. The reasons why we're still researching it, but if their needs were never met, and their the cries were not heard and the parents were not loving, or they did not get their needs met, then they cut it off. Why have any empathy? I didn't get my needs met, so why should I do it for you? That's how they learn. That's all they know. And so that lack of empathy, and that's the hardest thing. Most people like, but I just don't understand. They don't feel. Well, they never learn to do it. You learned it, some things are learned behavior, some things are taught, but if parents are not teaching that to the kids, that, when you cry, your needs are, so what they do is they learn to manipulate to get their needs met. If I manipulate or use aggression, then I'm going to get what I need. I'll get what I want, and I'll get what I need by using aggression and manipulation to get my needs met. Not the fact that it should be a mutual, empathetic and mutual care between each other. They learn very dysfunctional coping mechanisms or coping skills. So hopefully this has helped today. I didn't really want to go too far into sexual abuse. Hopefully that was enough information, and I'm very sensitive at the fact that a lot of people are triggered when you start talking about sexual abuse, and usually I like to have them in a clinical setting when I talk about it, because there's an array of emotions that usually come out. It's like peeling an onion. People realize, oh my gosh, that's exactly how I felt, or I never thought about it like that, and so hopefully none of you have been triggered. If you have been triggered, I just need you to take an opportunity maybe to find a therapist, a mentor, or someone that is not a best friend that wants to make you feel better and not tell you the truth. Go to a therapist that specializes in trauma, or go to a therapist that is, that is able to help you even with the grief and loss process. This is some very hard information to give people, and to have a realization of this is how your personality has developed. And I don't mean the narcissist, I mean the survivor, even of childhood trauma, your perception, you really wanted a family, especially those that have been neglected, rejected, people that have gone through the foster care system, you really, for some of them, they really desire to have a family. So they develop this family image in their head, and then they try to recreate it with a mate. Well, the person is not in your head, and you're imposing this image that is in your head. You're holding them accountable for what is in your head and what you have idealized. I think that's the word. What you have come up with your head, but you can't hold them accountable for something that's in your head. It's not real. You're dealing with a different human being. That's why I tell women, take your time in dating. Dating is like a long application process and background check. Don't be so quick to give up your emotions. Check out a person for a long time. You don't make a long-term investment into something if you haven't studied it. And many women or even men, jump in at feet first with your emotions. Your emotions, as my mentor said, your emotions should be the last investment that you make. Remember, you're interviewing this individual. You're interviewing this individual if this is a lifelong partner that you're going to have. Interviewing this individual to see what do they act like when they get angry. How do they treat their family members? How do they treat the women in their families? How do they handle anger? I want to see what you look like and how you act when you're angry. How do you conduct business? How do you invest your money? Do you have a job? Do you live with your parents? Why do you live with your parents? Are you capable of managing money? Because if you can't manage money, you're not going to manage my money. Are you capable of taking care of me? Even though I should be adding to, are you capable of taking care of me if something were to happen? And likewise, can I take care of you if something happens? How do you handle children? What do you act like with children? What are your children? Do your children like you? Do you like your children? How do you talk about your ex-wife? How do you talk about your ex-husband? Let me see what you say. Do you take accountability for your actions in a relationship? Some people come out of, divorces, and do you take accountability for your action? What role did you play in breaking up the marriage? These are some really, my big sister talked about it yesterday during a forum. But these are some hard questions that we have to ask. You don't invest in something if you don't have, you don't invest in, even in IRAs, or you study it before you invest that much money. That's a great law. So you look before you invest in these $1 million buildings or homes or anything like that. You want to make sure that you're getting your money's worth. Well, why not do that with relationships? You need to study it. This is a long application process. This is not an application process where you submit it one day and I'm gonna call you. The next day we're gonna sit on an interview and then I'm gonna tell you, yeah, you're it. Ladies, you got to be smart. Gentlemen, you have to be smart. Whenever you meet a woman, it's her representative that you're going to meet. It's her calling card. You stay with her long enough, you're going to see what she looks like when she takes her makeup off, when she takes these old pretty eyelashes off, when she pulls her hair off. What does she look like? Is she bald-headed by choice, and do you like that? Or can you handle what she looks like when she takes the mask off? What does she act like when she get comfortable? How does she eat? When you go out to eat, does she eat like a pig? Does she have any, etiquettes about herself? Is she a professional woman? Women, you can't look for a professional man and you're ghetto. He just want to bring you out there. Okay, sex is only good for a while. If you use your acrobats, that's you're going to have to use your acrobats when you're like 100 years old to keep them. If that's how you pull them in, that's how you're going to have to keep them. Eventually, that gets boring too. After a while, you're with a person. Hopefully, when you're with a person that you really want to be with, that it'll grow. It'll get better with time. But if that's the way that you got him, whatever way that you got him could be a possibility of how you're going to lose him. So if you got him with sex and good looks, eventually, your good looks may fade. Too much plastic surgery, your eyeballs will be in your hairline. Your eyebrows will be on the back of your head. Look at the parents. Look at the family history. What is the family history like? Drug, alcohol, abuse, we got to be smart. We got to be smart. This is a lifelong investment, and narcissistic personality disorder and narcissist abuse is real. It is real, and it causes a lot of damage. That's a high-risk stake to take with lack of information. So hopefully this has helped. I don't want to just keep on talking like I'm on a tangent or something like that, but I really hope this has helped. Go to my YouTube page, subscribe to my channel, Dr. Carmen Bryant, Overcoming Narcissist Abuse. You're welcome to go to my Facebook page, my professional Facebook page. It is Psychological Health Consultants and Services. and like the page so that you can see when the videos pop up. Also, make sure you hit the bell on the YouTube channel so that the videos will pop up. Thank you so much for watching. You can email me anytime. Thank you guys for all the emails. Thank you for the stories and sharing with me. I'm really honored that you would trust me like that. I know some of you don't really want to post questions publicly. You don't want people to know that you're asking questions, and I honor that. I respect that, and you're welcome to ask me any question you want to on the email, even if you want me to talk about certain topics. It is Dr. Carmen Bryant, DrCarmen Bryant at outlook.com. You're welcome to email me anytime. Thank you guys so much. As my friend always says, go and be great.